So let me go back to share just the outline again to get it on the recording. And so these are the things that we're going to cover at today's meeting. The first thing to do is to enable Zoom. And to do that, we're going to go to the settings of Zoom. And forgive me, there we are. Sorry for the long dramatic pause. So let me make sure that I'm sharing the right screen. Let me note that what we're doing is actually quite a bit harder than what you'll have to do in class because I'm trying to go among multiple screens. So on Zoom, if you've downloaded your Zoom client, then you want to have it configured. You may not ever have to do this, but if you want, it's useful to be able to do it so that you can start things just from Zoom, not just from Sakai. So you can host a video, you can show participants video if you want. You want them to sign on using telephone and computer audio. I would suggest join before host because as you saw, if you're here before the host, you can hang out rather than just keep trying over and over again. The rest of these, we'll talk about some of them. You should allow chat, certainly. You may or may not want to allow private chat. Private chat allows people to ask each other questions. That's not recorded, but that's okay. You certainly should allow screen sharing, at least for yourself. There's a question of whether you want to allow anyone else to share their screen. And the main reason I wanted to do this was you need to check to allow breakout rooms. That may not be the default. So if you go to your Zoom client, make sure that breakout rooms are checked and then enabled. So this allows the host to assign participants to breakout rooms if you want to do it specifically. And if this is not enabled, then you won't be able to do it on the main screen. So that's what enabling going through and configuring Zoom looks like. So I'll stop sharing Zoom and go back to the PowerPoint. And again, the PowerPoint is what you're going to be mostly using. And so you would just be going forward in the PowerPoint. And I am a little bit worried that a lot of us have a process that we're used to using. We have maybe a stack of papers for notes or a set of materials that we're used to. And we're going to, when you're starting out doing online teaching, it looks something like this. This was actually an assignment for a preschool. It's hard to know where to start. It seems like you're already done, but since you know you have to do something, well, you should continue. So I do want to point out there's a number of other resources that are better than what we're doing, which is just trying to demystify some of this. To enable Zoom in Sakai, go to your Sakai account, choose the course that you want to set up, click on Site Info, click on the Manage Tools box, and then make sure that the box in front of Zoom Meetings is checked. So I'm now going to do that, but these are the things that you need to do. I'm not asking you to do them. These are the things that you need to do. And so I'm going to share Sakai.
Mike, can I fill in some dead air while you're
Please
looking
do.
for it? All right, so I have some suggestions because I've worked through almost all the custom settings in Zoom that I think might apply in the context of teaching. One is under your settings, when you go to your preferences, I would encourage you to show my meeting duration so that you can track the length of your meeting. That can be toggled on and off. Another one that you might be interested in changing is changing your app theme to light. That's in part because what'll happen is your screen will, by having the theme on light, will emit more brightness, and so you'll be brighter and easier to watch, and your facial gestures will be more visible to your audience. Another one is to turn on co-hosting in the chance that you would ever want to delegate the option to allow for a second person to monitor and change settings. So for example, if you do something that Mike will talk about later, probably like a breakout room, where you are organizing group discussions and they're siloed and sandboxed into little groups. If you delegate to a TA a co-hosting option, then you can actually have them go in and change assignments while you're jumping in and out of groups and doing discussions. Mike, are you ready to take back over?
I am ready, and those are good suggestions. So thank you. I don't know what the problem was, but as is so often the case, when I turned it off and started it again, it worked. So it is like a kind of magic talisman. So you should be able to see Sakai for the course I'm teaching this semester, which is the Teaching Politics Certificate Program. And what I have done is I've already added Zoom meetings to this. If you don't have Zoom meetings among your tools, you'll need to go to Site Info, Manage Tools, and then they're alphabetical. So you will go down to Zoom Meetings, and then make sure that the Zoom Meetings is connected, is clicked, and then it will ask if you really do want that. And so finish. And then the little Zoom icon will appear over here, and it will appear there from then on. And while I'm here, let me notice you need to do the same thing for Warpwire. So you go to Manage Tools and make sure that you have also enabled Warpwire. So both of the two external tools at the bottom on Sakai, you have enabled. And then now, if you go to Zoom, we can do the things that Sean was just talking about. You want to schedule a new meeting. And so the name of my class is Political Science 790. You can add some description if you want. That class meets on Mondays. So the first meeting would be on Monday at 5 or so. The class meets for 2 hours and 30 minutes. And time zone is fine. This is important. You don't want to have to set each one up separately. So you want to click on recurring meetings. It recurs, in my case, weekly. Now, you can put it any day that you want. It's on Mondays, and for some reason, by default, it checks whatever day you're in. So make sure that the only day that is checked is the day that you actually want. And this is a graduate class, so the end date is, let's say, April 29th. And then we have host and participant video are on. You want people to be able to connect by telephone or computer audio. And this is some of the same configuration that we did if you did this through Sakai. So right now we're using Sakai through, forgive me, we're using Zoom through Sakai. And so we have the same considerations. Mute participants upon entry. For the most part, they can turn on if they want. You want to enable join before host. And here is what Sean was just saying. You can enable an alternative host who could start it. That way, if you miss a class, the alternative host could do it. Let's say that my alternative host is Aldrich, because I am doing a class with him. And then I can save him as an alternative host. He can then host that meeting. And we'll see if we can get Jason to talk some about using polls or some other parts of some other aspects of Zoom. And then I use Google Calendar, you can use Outlook Calendar, but if you want to save it and add, I'm going to add it to my Google Calendar, and then it asks me for an account. I'm going to allow that. So I had turned all this off to make it possible for you to see. That generates in your calendar the invite that I sent to you. There's a lot more information there than you actually probably need. Actually, all you need to do is the foolproof way to do it is to copy that URL. You also can generate that URL on your own, and then go to Messages, Compose, send it to all participants. And I'm actually going to send this because I intentionally had not done it before. Class for remainder of spring. And then here is the meeting URL. That means that they will be able to join that recurring meeting, and I'll send out an email telling them more details. I want to do this just quickly. But now, and I saw Elliot was here, the people who are in the class should get an email telling them how they can join the class. So that is how to set up. I wanted to go through it. I realize it's clunky, but I wanted to go through it for an actual class. So let me stop sharing there, and we'll go back to the PowerPoint. And again, you will not have to go back and forth so much with PowerPoints. So this is actually a little bit harder and more cumbersome than what you did, what you will do. So we've configured Zoom, and to remind you what we just did, make sure you mute all to start. Make sure that you enable everyone's video and you enable join before host. Enable breakout rooms if it is not checked, and enable chat and private chat. So to schedule class meetings, it's probably better to record automatically to the cloud, so you won't have to forget to record, as I did for this class. So let's go back to share that Sakai. So you should see Sakai again. Now I'm going to Zoom meetings, and notice that it's listed all of these. So I'm going in here to look at this one, and record the meeting automatically is not checked. So I'm not going to go, well, it only takes a second. So you saw me forget it. I wish I had done it on purpose. Make sure you check record the meeting automatically. And what comes up then is on the local computer or in the cloud. You want it in the cloud. It's an enormous file. It's recorded as a raw video. It's an enormous file. And as we'll see, Duke has actually done a pretty clever thing and set up Warpwire to be able to connect with Zoom automatically. So that saves a ton of your time and space. You don't have to work with this enormous file on your local computer. So now we'll stop sharing that, and I will go back to sharing the PowerPoint.
Mike.
Yes.
Can you clear up some confusion for me? This is actually prompted by Livia, which is once you create a recurring course weekly, is it the same link for every week? So in other words, the same URL link that's getting reshared that's prompted for that week, or are new URLs generated for every single meeting?
I
think it's the same, isn't it?
I believe it's the same.
Yeah.
I have not done it for a recurring meeting. It would be odd if that's not true, but this will certainly work for the first week. If you have to do it if you do have to generate new ones for the second one, we'll probably all find that out together. But I'm pretty sure that since it is that is singular, recurring meeting, that the one URL will always allow you to join that same group. It'll just be recorded separately each time. I may just be wrong about that. I'm afraid that's, you're asking something, but that's, since that was in a chat, I assume, we'll get that question answered.
Mike,
Yes.
when you were on that list of recurring meetings that had already populated, every single one of those meetings had the same meeting ID. That should be the link. And it's
Right, the meeting ID is actually part of the link. So this is Jason, right?
Yes.
So Jason has used it some. Do you want to say any more about recurring meetings?
Yeah. One more thing. Do you mind getting back to that screen and sharing the screen with the meeting setup? Because the process that you went through was really good for if you want to set up a recurring course meeting where everybody shows up and you're talking to them live. But I'm probably going to want to need to do is set up recurring office hours. And so when you're going to set up office hours, one of the options that's down below here is, scroll down just a wee bit. This enable waiting room is one of the meeting options. And that's going to be key if you want to use Zoom for live office hours so that you can meet with one student at a time and keep the others who've shown up sort of in a holding pen.
And it keeps a queue. It keeps a queue.
Yeah, and then you choose, you can bring in more than one at a time if you'd like, but you get to maintain greater control over who can actually hear what's going on in the meeting. And that allows you to do one-by-one office hours.
All right, so it probably is a little hard to envision what Jason is saying. Let me see if I understand it well enough to be able to repeat it. If you want to use this for office hours, so you have a recurring meeting, say every Monday from 1 till 3, and the students come to your office hours, whereas normally they might wait outside, you want to enable a queue. If you click enable waiting room, then that means that in the order that they show up, you'll be able to take one or multiple ones and in effect create a small mini meeting. When you end that meeting, it'll take you back to the waiting room.
I don't know what happens when a student leaves office hours. I haven't been in their perspective, but
what happens from your perspective?
I
You
get
leave
to
them.
I get to bring in the next person.
Yeah, okay. All right, so that is a great suggestion for office hours. I have not used that. That's one of the reasons we have Jason here. Let me introduce Jason Todd, who's been using Zoom quite a bit for classes at DKU. And so I do hope that you will interrupt again, because pretty much the worst thing you say will still be better than the best thing that I say. So anything else at this point, Jason?
Well, when would be a good time to talk about some of the other features of Sakai to enable besides?
Well, why don't you do it now? But that means you should share your screen.
Sure.
So I'm going to stop sharing, and it'll take Jason a second to get to his screen.
Do folks see my screen?
It says you've started screen sharing. Ah, there you go.
And can you hear me?
I
Yeah.
know I can hear you. I think that
All right.
means everybody can.
Sure. So on site info, which is where Mike went to enable Zoom and Warpwire, there are a whole bunch of other tools. And if you're moving to a fully online class, some of them that are not enabled by default are probably going to be pretty useful for you.
Can you talk
Things like-
louder, Jason?
Yeah, there are other tools here that when you move to a fully online class, they're going to be pretty useful. Things like Dropbox, which allows your students to turn in assignments. They are automatically time-stamped when they put them in the Dropbox, and you can grade them. You download it, grade it, and you can put it back in the Dropbox for them. Things like forums are a great way to facilitate discussion asynchronously outside of the live meetings. One of the things that I've done both for my online class and for in-person classes at Duke is to use these forums where students have to post questions about the readings the day before class. so that they're already engaging with the readings. They have to read each other's posts and mark them as read so that everybody has an idea of where discussion is going to be going before class even starts. And forums is not, it's not enabled by default, so that's something you would have to do. Things like the polling feature, I've never actually used it myself, but it is available. Obviously, you're going to want resources to put all of the readings that you're going to give them. Tests and quizzes, depending on how you're going to teach, you might wind up moving to open book quizzes or, God forbid, tests. And so you've got to enable that. It's not enabled by default. It's relatively easy to go through and make a quiz. I'm happy to talk about that at some other time if anybody wants to, but I've been using it on a weekly basis. And it is nice because you can set it to either, you can set the number of submissions that a student has, you can set when it's available and when it's not available and how long they have to do it. So like my students who are in 7 different time zones, they can take it anytime in a 24-hour period for 20 minutes. They get 1 submission. And then I grade it and give back feedback 24 hours later. Those are some of the, I think, most useful features of Sakai that maybe are not enabled by default. So I'm going to hand it back.
I have a question. It seems you don't use Warpwire.
Yeah.
How do you distribute the videos of the, Jason often does his classes asynchronously. So he will distribute a URL to the cloud.
Yeah, so in the Zoom meetings tab with cloud recordings, you would have all of your recordings right here and you could just share a link to them. So what I lose by not editing my videos is basically, you know, a few seconds of fluff at the beginning and end of every video that I could edit out and then upload the video to Warpwire, but I just don't bother with that. So,
but okay, I actually found out today, and I'll talk about it in a few minutes, Warpwire links directly to Zoom. And then you don't have to send the URL because all the students can just go to Warpwire and they have all the Zoom URLs. And you don't have to upload it. So but as an alternative, you can always just send the URL. Yes?
Yes, you can always send the URL.
Okay. All right, that's pretty simple. All right, thank you. And now we'll go back to sharing the PowerPoint. So it's probably better to record automatically to the cloud. I failed to do that, but now I went back and changed it. And you'll have wasted time at the beginning, like I did at this class, when you won't forget to record, and then save and put on the calendar. Manage participants, then all you have to do, I can show you how to do this, but manage participants is on the host screen. I don't think it's on anyone's screen except the host screen. And when you are going to manage participants, let me get out of sharing that. And then just on the main screen, then if I press manage participants, and you guys probably can't see this, but over on the right side, it has a list of 32 participants with all their names. And it tells me whether their video is on, whether their audio is on. So I can mute all, I can unmute all. Being able to manage participants with that button there at the bottom is quite useful. So I'll go back to sharing the PowerPoint.
Mike.
Yes.
Mike, another thing to mention during the brief discussion on participants, when you see that flyout box on the side that shows all the participants, you can go into your settings under general and then view more settings and then change something called attention tracking. And attention tracking runs a little timer on the person's interaction with their PC or cell phone or tablet. so that you'll know whether a person is fully disengaged, even if you cannot see them. This might be valuable if you are going to call on somebody to speak or expect interaction. There'll be a small little identifier near the microphones in the flyout window for participants that has a miniature clock, and that clock represents the idea that they have been disengaged from the app by not moving their cursor or other things like that.
I can't show that unless I'm running two computers simultaneously, because that is from the host view. What is the name of it again?
It's called attention tracking.
Okay.
And what I can do is send you all a list of a list of the things that are connected to the stuff that I've been talking about that are just.
But you're not going to see that until you're hosting your own meeting, and so we can't do it today.
That's right. That's a host power. That's right.
But we're going to.
What kind of intention is it? Is it tracking? What is it tracking?
So, for example, my understanding is that it will track users' engagement with the app. So if they're moving their mouse, and it constantly runs a clock on your participants to know if they are. So your participants, for example, could turn off the video and just let the microphone run in the background. But what attention tracking does, I believe, is that it runs a clock on the on whether the person is using their computer at all to know that they're engaged locally near the device where you are trying to
I'm
have
a
a discussion
little
with them.
skeptical of this Orwellian intrusion, but it does allow you. Suppose that they're typing on their keyboard, because their microphone's muted. They could be typing on their keyboard in email, and that would be a way to find out if they're paying attention. For a large number of students, that is a lot to try to keep track of. For a small number of students, yes, it might mean that if someone is typing, then you could call on them and get their attention back, and they'll think, how did Peter Fever know? He has contacts in the Defense Department.
So I just sent a link to the group that shows the Help Center's discussion on attention tracking. So I might not have summarized it perfectly, but it is one more tool in your toolkit for trying to make sure that you're engaging with your audience correctly. But I'll mute myself now.
Can I jump in for a sec, Mike?
Please.
So it sounds like I've never used that feature that Sean's talking about, but it sounds like it would be particularly useful, like he said, if the camera's off and you're not actually watching them. But
yeah,
one of the things that over the course of the last few weeks, DKU has decided is a best practice is that if you're having a live course, you make everybody turn on their cameras, and you make everybody visible. Everybody treats it more like a real class. They can't show up in their PJs if they know they're going to have to show up and you're requiring them to turn on the camera. And if that's the case, then that feature wouldn't be quite as useful.
And you said that had evolved, Jason, that at first people were worried that people wouldn't have access to video, but it turns out that has not been a problem, at least for you guys at DKU.
It hasn't been nearly as much of a problem as we feared. At the outset of the transition to online classes, equity was a concern, that people would not be able to make the live meetings. They wouldn't have the technological capabilities. But we've seen like 95% of the people, 95% of the time have been able to get to the meetings. We're still not going to make attendance to live Zoom sessions required, but we are strongly encouraged to do them, whereas at the beginning, we were strongly encouraged to emphasize asynchronous aspects of the class.
All right, for sharing the screen, it's there. And again, from the reason I'm doing this is from the perspective of you being able to work as hosts. That's what it's going to look like. You may not have seen it, and you can't see it on your screen now, and that's all it takes to share your PowerPoint. So a number of you, I think, were asking, how can I use PowerPoint? You start the meeting, you look to see if people are there, and then you have the PowerPoint running already. You press share, and a list of screens will come up. Just choose the one that is the PowerPoint, and then you'll basically be in PowerPoint, which is what I've been doing. And then you can run through the PowerPoint just as if it's a normal class. So instead of I'm having to go back and forth, it's actually pretty sketchy. But all you have to do is run through your PowerPoint like it's a regular class. And if it's a small class, you can enable people to ask questions just by unmuting them, but you may want to leave them muted for the most part because of background noise. And then breakout rooms. And breakout rooms are over here on the right. And it is useful. I'm going to stop sharing and show you how breakout rooms work. So we have 32 participants. Let's say that we're looking for 4 people per breakout room. I am going to click on breakout rooms. So I'm going to assign the 31 participants into 8 breakout rooms, which means there's going to be 3 or 4 participants per room. So I'm going to click on create rooms on the screen that I can see. All you're going to see is, do you want to join a breakout room? So what's going to happen is that the software, since I haven't given it any guidelines, what the software is going to do is assign 3 or 4 of you to random breakout rooms. And those breakout rooms serve pretty well as discussions. So let's say I'm going now to ask you to form up into groups. We're going to come back in 5 minutes, but I want each group to come up with a plan for Duke University to handle graduation. So how should the problem of graduation be handled? And I'm not going to take actually 5 minutes. I'll come back in 1. And if you feel like talking about it, go ahead. But I'm going to break these meetings up in just over 1 minute. So I am now sending you to your breakout rooms. You're obviously seeing it from the perspective of the students, not the person doing it, but I want you to see from the perspective of the students because this is helpful. You have to join. So you're going to get an invitation to join one of the breakout rooms. Click on join, otherwise you'll just stay here. So I'm asking you now to get up virtually and go to your breakout rooms. Go. Okay, we're back. So that gives you, and I think I'm unmuted. Somebody wave if you can hear me. Okay, thank you. So that should give you an idea of how the breakout rooms work, and it actually works quite well. To break up in the middle of a lecture is a pretty big help. So that obviously, even for a small class, the sense of personal interaction in this setting is pretty bad. So students like breakout rooms. They may be more used than you expect to being able to interact in that kind of setting. So I'm going to go back to share and to the slideshow.
Mike, do you want to mention briefly what permission controls you have as someone who manages those breakout rooms?
Well, why don't you tell us?
Well, so if I remember correctly, what will happen is that you can see synoptically an overview of everyone in the different rooms. And you can actually send messages to all the different rooms to remind them that time is up in a few minutes. You can be, as a host, you can jump in and out of different rooms, whereas participants cannot. And also,
so let's say those 2 things. You have a God view of a gallery, and you can see the different rooms. You can join any of them, but when you join, it's not anonymous. You joined. I joined the Becker Hangout, and then came back. But you can also send a message to the entire group. So there's 2 different things that you can do that are valuable. You can join a group if you want to see how they're doing, and you can send a message to the entire group saying 30 more seconds and I'm going to close up.
And so you can also individually move people around.
Yeah. You also can
mid breakout room.
You can assign it to begin with, or you can move them around once you have. So one thing that may happen is you notice that someone has not joined, and maybe they just don't know the other people in the breakout room. If you've noticed that they talk to some people, they seem to get along, you can move them to a different group. So sometimes one thing that people have used this have said, they notice that people may not join. There's only 3 or 4. It's a little bit, it's virtual, but it's a little intimate. You're there with 3 other people. If they don't join, maybe you can move them to another group. That does 2 things. It means they may know the people, and it means they know you're watching, so they're more likely to join. So any other things, Jason or Sean, about breakout rooms? All right. So now we're going to talk about Warpwire. And Warpwire actually works surprisingly well. So I'm going to stop sharing that and go to share Sakai again. And I'm going up and I'm going to click on Warpwire. So when you're in Warpwire, I've already set it up to connect to this class, but if you go to account, so it looks like this. If you go to account, there's this thing that's called media libraries, and that is rather cryptic. It doesn't say much, but you click on media libraries and then you go to Zoom settings, and that seems kind of odd. We're in Warpwire, but Warpwire plays really well with Zoom. So you click on Zoom settings, and I have already connected mine. It'll for you, it'll have something that says, do you want to connect your Zoom account to Warpwire? And you say yes. You can create rules for being able to use it. Once you've done that, then that means that for your media library, you have all the different, all of the things that you would have to send out for a URL, the students can just see. So I go over here and it has 0 assets because I haven't put any videos up, but under here would be listed all of the classes. So the nice thing about this, the way Jason has done it makes sense. You send out the URLs for the individual classes, but suppose they say, I want to look at the one that was from March 30th. They would have to find the email for that particular URL. If you connect Zoom to Warpwire, and it's easy, it just takes a second, all of the list by date will be here in Warpwire, which means that they can go back and look at any of the classes that they want. And you don't have to fool with sending out the URL. So Jason or Sean, do you have anything to say about distributing the videos?
I'll just offer one other thing, which is that I don't actually email out the links. All I do, in my resources folder on Sakai, I have a particular folder for my Zoom lectures. And one thing you can do with the resources folder is you can add PDFs, but you can also add links. So every time I make a new Zoom lecture video, I just add a new link or 2 into that resources folder. So it's always there in Sakai. If I had known how well Sakai played with Zoom and Warpwire when I first started the class, I would be doing what Mike is suggesting, but I didn't know that. So this was an alternative that I came up with.
Well, I didn't know it until 12:30 today, because I thought this is too stupid. There must be a better way. So, but sure, having a list with the URLs, it just means you have to update the URL each time, but it takes 30 seconds. But Warpwire, it's there automatically. The downside is the students have to think to go to Warpwire, but you should be able to describe that on your syllabus. So anything from you, Sean?
Just that I'm noticing that with so many organizations onboarding to Zoom, that the gap between a finished recording like the one we're currently in right now and access to it in the cloud is just extending over time. I think it's something to do with the rendering, but you could be fielding questions from students like, why can't I access in the cloud? It's been 18 hours. It might be a full 24.
18 hours. Really?
I saw a lag of 12 hours the other day
Wow.
for a recording.
So
So
I have noticed a
this,
lag of an hour on the ones that I have done, which is longer than I was expecting. I thought it just didn't work. But then an hour is a pretty long time. It's okay, you can use it. But on the other hand, having it available, because it is still Zoom that's doing the recording, and it's still in the cloud. So there's no way around that. That's not a warp. You're right, but that's not a Warpwire question. So the bottom line, and Sean makes a good point, is it may take pretty longer than you expect for the video to become available. So don't write a check that you can't cash by telling students, look, you'll have it in 10 minutes. It may very well be 12 hours. And at different times, if there's other people competing, there may be even more. So I'm going to stop sharing that and go back to the PowerPoint just so I can say thanks. And if you are interested in the political science website here at Duke for some more information, I'm happy to get texts or emails to try to answer questions. I will almost certainly just forward them to someone who actually knows the answer. But if you watch this video and you have questions and you're not able to do chat, which is what we asked people to do live during the video, feel free to contact us, and we appreciate your attention. So I'm going to stop sharing and I'm going to stop recording.